stream or whatever.
I do, and I did pre-pull up a few things, the newest blog about racial justice and also the one about the DEA. So if you have any other ones, please do send those to me and we'll get that. All right.
Hey, what's up, Justin? How you doing, man?
Hey, Dave, I'm doing all right. Just another day in Washington, D.C.
Were you out there in front of the White House today?
I was for a little bit, but I spent most of the day learning all about DEA statutes and their ability to be have their powers expand, their scope of enforcements expanded, because that happened yesterday.
Yes, we published your article on our social media today.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, that came out of left field, and I'm not surprised, but I'm still disappointed.
Yeah.
All right, so just so everybody knows, we are now totally set up. Looks like we've already got quite a few participants that have called in on the Zoom. The live stream Facebook has already got people watching as well. So let me just kind of remind everybody first, if you are in the Zoom, there is a Q&A portion at the bottom. After we talk with Justin and Dave, we will do the Q&A portion. If you're streaming on Facebook, I'm going to try to keep up with the comments as best as I can over there. And that way we can address any questions you guys might have as well. There will be some informational links that we will drop in either the chat here on Zoom or comments on Facebook. So I think let's go ahead and kick off at 8 o'clock promptly, the June monthly meeting for Texas Normal. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jax Finkel. I'm the Executive Director for Texas Normal. I've been with the organization for many years as a volunteer, and then now as the first person working for cannabis law up at the Capitol. And start off tonight, before we get into the business of what we have, to kind of talk about what's going on right now. I know here in Texas and across the country, the pandemic has kind of put people in an isolated kind of situation. And now, because of some of the police brutality that we've seen on the streets, there's been protests and some other things that have occurred. And so I want to take the opportunity to recognize that Jim Crow law is what the war on drugs was created and founded on. And it was to continue to marginalize people who were different at the time from everyone else. And I think that it's important that we recognize this, and in our fight to make sure we can change the laws, that we make sure that voices are included that have been marginalized and negatively impacted by this. So I want to just, everybody, let's take a few seconds together just to quietly think about the impact that this has on the work that we do and the people that we love. So. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate that. I do want to, let everybody know that the DC office has released a blog that I'll drop in the comments having to do with racial injustice. And also let you know that Texas Normal as an organization years ago created a policy specifically about racism and our intolerance for that. And so I just wanted to share that with everybody and make sure that you know where we stand. And so if you have any questions about that, you can feel free to email me or reach out to me however you want, but jax@texasnormal.org. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Let's go ahead and kick off. Thank you for allowing me a little bit of a somber note in the beginning, but let's go ahead and kick off and start with Justin. Justin is at the DC office, I believe, right now, and has been dealing with a lot of interesting things. So Justin, if you'd go ahead and tell us what's going on.
Oh, you got it, Jackson. And thank you so very much for having me join your monthly meeting. And, you know, I absolutely loved coming down to Texas last year for your policy summit, and it's really inspirational, the amazing work that you and so many other organizers are doing down in Texas, which is going to, it continues to be obviously a very difficult battle for you, and it's a privilege to get to represent you guys here in DC. So I got a couple of things on the agenda that I wanted to give all of you an update regarding what's happening here in our nation's capital regarding marijuana policy reform legislation. And I will actually start, though, to amplify what Jack's just mentioned in regards to the recent protests that have come up all around the country, because last night it became public. It was first reported by BuzzFeed that the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, has just been granted authorization for a dramatically expanded scope of enforcement capabilities. So traditionally, under Title 21, which is the legal framework of the Controlled Substances Act, and what empowers the DEA to be able to take law enforcement actions against, you know, what we have decided to be criminalized, which includes cannabis as a Schedule I drug. Their enforcement priorities and powers were very limited to that. So while we have over decades now increased our appropriations, our spending on the DEA, and all of the surveillance technology that they have, and all of the whole paramilitary-esque state that is the Drug Enforcement Administration, it has now been authorized for 14 days to be used against protesters in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. I was just outside walking the streets of downtown DC for a little while. I saw numerous DEA agents out. I don't know what it means for you guys down in Austin and Houston and Dallas and all around Texas, but just something that I wanted to flag for everybody and make sure. You know, the DEA, they in the memo, and I sent Jax the link to it. She has a link to it. So I hope she'll share it. They repeatedly in the memorandum requesting the expansion of authority cited that they will enforce all of federal law. So where that comes into conflict is, you know, in Texas, y'all are very well aware of the prohibition and criminalization of cannabis statewide. But even in jurisdictions where you may have friends and family who live in states that have a different legal status, they could be registered medical marijuana patients, they could be living in an adult use state. But because of marijuana's Schedule I status under federal law, that would be something that we are concerned that the DEA might do, or just, again, in general, the utilization of DEA resources to infringe upon individuals who are peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. So whether or not you agree with current protesting or anything, it's just something to know. I think we can all agree that the Drug Enforcement Administration has nothing to do with that, and we're very concerned, and we're working with our allies trying to do what we can to elevate this issue. So moving on, Capitol Hill, what's happening in Washington, D.C. with marijuana policy? You know, it's no secret that we have a very divided government, and when it comes to Congress and the originator of legislation, we have two very different fights that we're working on between the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. But there's been a lot of landmark accomplishments, and I think that we need to celebrate the incrementalist accomplishments that we have to, if anything, to continue to give us hope to keep fighting, right? So we made a lot of firsts this year. I'll start with the small and work my way up. So first off is the Safe Banking Act. For those of you who are unaware, and again, I know some of this doesn't really apply to Texas because you guys are under, still under criminalization. But the Safe Banking Act is narrow legislation that would specifically provide a safe harbor for financial institutions, aka the banks, to be able to provide basic banking services to state legal cannabis companies. So for the other legal states, if any of you have traveled and gone to a legal state and made purchases from a state licensed dispensary, it was likely you had to use cash. There are a handful of businesses that have been able to get private banking services from local credit unions, and thank goodness for local credit unions. But largely the cannabis industry is going unbanked. So this was something that we figured this could be narrow legislation. We could build a broad coalition of unlikely allies and be able to advance this in a nonpartisan fashion. And that's just what we did in the House of Representatives. Earlier this year, late last year in September, the Safe Banking Act became the first bill that was cannabis focused to ever pass in a chamber of Congress that would liberalize policy. And I don't mean liberalize left and right, I mean liberalize like less criminalization. So very narrow legislation, just dealing with the banks. I mean, we got the American Bankers Association standing next to me at the press conference afterwards as we're declaring victory for this. It's kind of a surreal moment. But so that passed. Unfortunately, you know, we had some promising conversations with Senate leadership on the Senate side of things. Since then there's been a breakdown. The chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Crapo, if any of you have friends or family who live in Idaho, it is arguably the only state worse than Texas when it comes to cannabis policies, except for maybe South Dakota too, because they don't even allow hemp for those two states. So he doesn't have a political motivation from his state to advance cannabis reform. He had said some promising things, but late last year he walked those back, and he made some what we view to be pretty ridiculous demands to be included in the bill. Not limited to, but most egregiously, a 2% THC cap for marijuana programs around the country. So, you know, I don't know exactly what future all of you envision as what Texas, an adult use marketplace in Texas should look like, or what a robust medical and patient-centric marketplace should look like. But I imagine it includes cannabis with higher than 2% THC in it. But we're still working on it. We're trying, work with a lot of our industry allies, and again, you know, but a lot of the heavy lifting we're working with, like the American Banking Association and various credit unions associations to get that done. Next up, something that Congress has, you know, we recently worked with congressional allies to have 44 letters or 44 signers on a letter regarding the Small Business Administration. I'll keep this real brief because, again, it doesn't really apply to Texas, but just so you guys have the context, you know, all around the country under the quarantine and the COVID-19 pandemic, marijuana shops have been deemed as, quote, essential in 25 states. Jax, I sent you another link of the blog that's tracking those states for those of you who might be interested. That, you know, we saw a radical advancement in marijuana policy reform in states that have already implemented a regulated market, such as, you know, curbside pickup, home delivery, access to telemedicine for physicians, and, you know, lowering areas, easing fees for medical appointments and recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So we sought to capitalize that in Congress and see if we'd be able to get small businesses and entrepreneurs access to the SBA when it comes to setting up a cannabis company or running one. Because it's our hope that when Texas goes legal, that Texan entrepreneurs and business owners will be able to get SBA access. So that way we're not going to see a rush of out-of-state money and owners coming in and dominating your Texas marketplace. I hope that I'm representing you well as I try to do that. So we're working on it. We got legislation crafted. And we worked with the House Small Business Committee, as well as Earl Blumenauer, one of our Cannabis Caucus co-chairmen, who is leading that effort. And then another very interesting and terrific development earlier this year. Time is weird, forgive me. Earlier this year, the House Veterans Affairs Committee passed two separate bills to expand veterans' access to medical cannabis, as well as expand the mandate on the Veterans Administration to conduct clinical trials when it comes to the efficacy of cannabis as an alternative for service-related common injuries. So both of those passed. These have been policies that we've been talking about for a long time. a lot of credit goes to, David's on here on the webinar, and it's because of the tireless work of David and all of the other Davids around the country who have made sure that when we see the efficacy of cannabis, particularly amongst issues common to veterans, that we've been able to advance it. So the biggest piece that we're excited about is the Veterans Equal Access Act. Right now, in the 33 states that have medical cannabis programs, VA doctors in those states are still prohibited from filling out the state legal recommendation form. So it forces veterans to have to pay out of pocket to go to, out of network to find a doctor who'd be willing to fill that out. What the Veterans Equal Access Act simply does is it protects VA doctors from being able to be fired or have actions taken against them for filling out that state legal piece of paperwork. So should a VA doctor in Texas fill out something that would be TCUP compliant, Texas Compassionate Use Program, if I'm getting that right, I'm seeing Jack's nod, yes, that they'd be able to do that. And as you continue to build upon the foundation that you've laid, they'd be able to fill out those recommendations for any qualifying conditions. So it would dramatically expand access and ease of access for veterans around the country. And it's the first time that legislation has ever passed out of a committee. So again, it hasn't gotten consideration by the full House. We're hoping to include it as part of a larger package in the near future. But again, a first is a first. It's the first time it's ever passed out of a committee. And lastly, the big kahuna, when are we going to end marijuana prohibition nationwide? That is the question. It's been 82 years and counting. So I want to highlight this, and Jax, if you could cue the action alert. The MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. This bill is something that we were very fortunate to have a good ally in the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, who has co-sponsored bills to end marijuana prohibition since they were first introduced a decade ago. And Mr. Nadler, received our input very well, and we crafted this bill which would end federal marijuana prohibition by removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. It would, and what it then would do, and I know everybody hates taxes, I get it, but it would impose a very, very small tax, a single point transaction as an excise tax, to fund the following programs. To fund the complete at no cost to the individual expungements of all federal marijuana-related crimes that were nonviolent, as well as establish an Office of Cannabis Justice to review any charges or previous convictions that weren't automatically really expunged right away. And then it would provide funding streams for state and local governments to apply for to be able to expunge criminal records in their localities. I know many of you are engaged in local organizing and hyper grassroots stuff, and that is so critically important. And I'm sure all of you have had local policymakers tell you and gripe to you about their budgets. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to incentivize local units of government to expunge these criminal records, because these records are being held by local DAs, local municipalities, and the states. They're not all held by the federal government. So we need those local efforts. So we wanted to make it really easy for you to be able to go to your city council, go to your mayor and say, hey, we can apply for this money and it would cost us nothing to expunge these criminal records. We need to do it. The bill would also, by removing marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, it would solve our veterans problem for VA doctors. It would solve a laundry list of issues when it comes to, documented immigrants currently cannot work in the cannabis industry, or else it would be a mark against them as they're moving through the legal immigration process. They would be marked as having not good character by USCIS. We don't think that's appropriate. If someone's checking all the boxes and coming here the right way, they should be able to work in the marijuana industry. It solves research, it solves a lot of other aspects. So the MORE Act is the vehicle that we're working to push through the House of Representatives and build support in the Senate. And for the first time ever, the House Judiciary Committee passed a bill to end federal marijuana prohibition last November 20th. So we got 420 and we got 1120 now as fun dates. So those are the big things that are happening nationwide. Again, for those of you who are just tuning in, I just want to recap something I said at the beginning. That is a new development as of last night, which we're very concerned about, which was the expansion of the enforcement purview of the the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. Just yesterday, they were approved to be able to fully utilize all of their resources to take action against the protesters that we see in the streets. And whether or not you agree with the protesters, or if you want to focus on a small minority of them who are being violent, or you're just against anything, you don't want to talk about it, whatever, I think we can all agree that fundamentally the DEA should not be used against people who are peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. And I think many of us would agree that maybe the DEA shouldn't exist anymore, but that's a whole other story. So when we talk about criminalization, I think it's something to be aware of. They have this authority for the next 14 days, and it's unclear whether or not it will be extended. Again, we're working with congressional allies to try to build pressure so that way it's not extended any further. The only last thing I have just to put on people's radar, that all of you who are on the National Normal email list will be getting emails for probably in about a couple weeks, is it's appropriation season again, which means it's when Congress is figuring out how to spend all of our money. And we have been successful in the past about getting appropriations amendments to successfully added to the bill. As of right now, federal law enforcement, i.e. the DEA, can legally not use one dime, one paper clip, one iota of federal resources to take action against Texas's teacup program, the compassionate use program. So it provides you the credible argument to your state policymakers that you need to build up that program, because the federal government legally cannot take any enforcement actions against it. So there's no reason why that you're not expanding medical patient rights there in the Lone Star State. That's my shtick. That's what I got. I'm sticking to it. Jax, I don't know how you want to do questions. I'm happy to spend a couple more minutes and get to any if they've been submitted.
So we usually open up for Q&A at the end. I know you're kind of like moving around where you're at. So is that okay if we stick to doing that? Will that work for your time frame?
How much longer?
Probably Dave has about 10 minutes and I have about 10 more minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But if you want to see if we have any now, I answered a few with the links that you sent me. So the DEA link, the racial injustice link, the MORE Act action. I think there was one more you mentioned in there, but I missed it. I didn't get that link. Which one was that?
So I actually have to finish. I'm working on some messaging guidance for some of our congressional allies regarding this DEA shit. Stuff. I shouldn't be cursing at your meetings. But no, just anybody who's out there who's watching who has a question for me. I stay up late. I do a lot of emails. Please feel free to email me. You can email me at policy@normal.org. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Honestly, Jax is one of my favorite organizers that I've had the privilege of meeting in my time at Normal, and I really, you guys have a Herculean task ahead of you, and when Texas moves, if for some reason we haven't fixed the federal government and federal prohibition first, which I think we might beat you. I don't want to make this a race, but I think we might beat you to ending federal prohibition.
We're so competitive, you think that we would step up.
I know, but if you guys are able to be successful, I know with the biannual legislature, it just means that you have to have more grit and more tenacity and double down and work harder, and it sucks. And there are days when you just want to give up, but this. So I wanted to give some good news. I hope that you've enjoyed the good news, and I hope that it inspires you to keep up the fight. And again, policy@normal.org. Ask me your questions. I'll respond to them in the next day or two. I stay up late and do emails, so we'll do that.
Yeah, I dropped it in the Q&A here and in the comments on Facebook, so I'm sure you'll probably get a couple of questions. I appreciate you taking the time out. I know it's really busy, and I guess I will probably see you virtually sometime very soon.
This year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The conference is normally when I see you. But I know that we'll connect again. So thank you very much for your time.
I know. Thanks. Solidarity, everybody. You be well.
You too. Bye-bye. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Dave, so that you can come up next. So there you go. You should be unmuted. So we're going to transition to actually a update about another state, but it's pretty interesting because it can potentially or could potentially affect Texans. So Dave Bass, he's a retired major from the Army, and he works with both Texas Normal and the organization that he founded, Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana. And so Dave is going to kind of catch us up to speed on what is happening in Oklahoma. So what's going on, Dave?
Well, first I would like to say that this is a 420 friendly event. So if you're a 420 kind of person, that is not prohibited during our event. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy and happy out there. It feels really weird that we haven't seen you in person in so long. And so when we all get together again, hopefully soon, it will be a time of great rejoicing. So Oklahoma legislature was in session, and a couple of weeks ago, right at the end of the session, they passed House Bill 3228 with a supermajority in the House and a supermajority in the Senate. And all the marijuana activists in Oklahoma were rejoicing because what 3228 did was make a really fantastic medical marijuana program better. There were a number of improvements to the program put in that bill. And two of them, one of them was home delivery to patients from dispensaries, which is very important for patients who have medical conditions to be able to get home delivery. And it also opens up a whole lot of brand new jobs for people who can work in that side of the business. And the other one was the ability for me to go to Oklahoma, as well as patients from all the other states around Oklahoma, and get a 90-day medical marijuana license for $100. And it would be very easy. It would be the same as an Oklahoma patient documenting their medical need and getting a license. And that would be great for me because my family lives in Oklahoma. But it would be great for many patients who would be able to go to Oklahoma and try medical cannabis and see if it would be effective for their medical condition. A cancer patient would be able to go to Oklahoma and use RSO for 90 days to treat their cancer, or use RSO instead of doing chemo and see if that helps. And so I was very excited about it. Many people in Texas and the surrounding states, I wanted to get a card. Another reason is so I could come show it to all of our legislators and say, when I cross the Red River into Oklahoma, I'm perfectly legal to use medical marijuana. And then as soon as I cross the Red River back into Texas, if I use medical marijuana, then I'm a criminal. And obviously that doesn't make any sense to any rational person. But the bottom line is everybody was rejoicing. And then, and this is a very good lesson learned, the bill got to the governor's desk, and Governor Kevin Stitt, for no reason, without warning, vetoed the bill. And everybody was shocked because he hadn't given any heads up about his concerns about the bill. And so, and it was the end of the session. And the Oklahoma marijuana activists knew that they had enough votes in the House to override the bill. And they believed that they could get enough votes in the Senate to override the veto. But the president of the Senate in Oklahoma refused to bring the bill back on the Senate floor to even attempt an override. And we're familiar with that in Texas with Dan Patrick, who, even though we know the majority of the Texas legislature wants to reform marijuana law, but Dan Patrick won't even allow bills to be heard in the Senate that reforms marijuana law in any important way. So the activists in Oklahoma got really busy. They generated thousands of telephone calls and contacts with their legislators in the governor's office. On Monday, the governor met with legislators and the Oklahoma Secretary of State to talk about a special session where he would call the legislature back and give them an opportunity to override the bill. But the decision was not made to call the legislators back, at least for now. And what the governor made clear is that the two things he opposes in 3228 is Governor Kevin Stitt opposes home delivery to medical marijuana patients, and he opposes this 90-day temporary medical marijuana license in Oklahoma for out-of-state patients. And so to the Durbin law firm is where I was checking today. They're representing the activists, and their thoughts are that that this idea of a 90-day temporary license is probably a no-go for now, no matter what happens. And so, if you've heard about this possibility, you can mark it off your list for now, because we don't think it's going to happen in Oklahoma anytime soon. Because the governor is very opposed to it. He doesn't want me or patients from out of state to come to Oklahoma and get a medical marijuana card. Even though the people of Oklahoma support it, even though a supermajority of the legislature supports it, Governor Stitt opposes it, and he's going to use his veto power to prevent that from happening. And the Oklahoma Senate doesn't want to go up against the governor on this issue. So that we just want to make sure that you knew that probably is not going to happen in Oklahoma. The other thing I want to say is we want justice for George Floyd. George is a Texan, and he was murdered in Minnesota. And we've had incidents like this in Texas, many incidents like this in Texas, law enforcement using deadly force for no reason. And we want it to stop. We want it to stop in Texas. We want it to stop in Minnesota. We want it to stop everywhere. And if law enforcement in Texas wants to know one way that they can improve relationships with our communities, is they can stop arresting 80,000 Texans every year for possessing a plant. It's a nonviolent crime. It's a victimless crime, and no one should be arrested for possessing marijuana in Texas. And we know that in Texas, the immovable brick wall when it comes to marijuana reform are the police associations. Every time a bill comes up to reform marijuana law, every time city councils consider it, the police unions oppose it, the Sheriff's Association opposes it, the Police Chiefs Association opposes it, CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas oppose it. Law enforcement show up in uniform on department time to testify against any attempt to change marijuana law in Texas. And so we call upon law enforcement in Texas at this time that if they want to have better relationships with the people of Texas, to stop arresting us for using cannabis and choosing to possess this plant. And we send all of our love and support to George Floyd's family down in Houston. Thank you. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. You know, if we're going to talk about it, I can talk about a few things just offhand to point to some of the racial injustice that you kind of closed on talking about there. Thank you for the Oklahoma update. But ACLU recently came out with their most updated study on the arrests, so for Black people in Texas, how more often are you likely to be arrested? And it was, I believe 2.6, so right around 3 times more likely. Well, where we live, or where we're mostly based out of here in Austin, the capital city, it's actually 3.6 times more likely. So while Texas as a whole was actually fairly decent on the decently ranked on the list of states, Austin actually has worse racial disparity than the state as a overall average. And I know that a lot of people were watching what we did with Decrim ATX, a coalition of people that came together to basically defund THC testing for non-felony amounts. And that passed, and we recently posted an update letting everybody know that the Chief Manley did confirm that they have stopped looking at all the testing. They are delayed in submitting their reports because of COVID, but hopefully that will bring more information. So if you're active with City Council, they actually will be hosting a special meeting tomorrow to specifically discuss the racial injustice and the police brutality that has been happening. So tune into that. There are also other city councils that are doing the same thing. I think it's really important that we remember at all times that though we change our laws at the state level, there's a lot of impact to be had at the local level and nationally too, throwing our voices behind things that are significant and important and making sure our legislators hear from us, because things are changing. Legislation and elections are coming up. So actually, I'm going to switch gears. Do you want to hang on for some Q&A portion at the end in case there's some questions, Dave?
Yes, and I also want to congratulate El Paso Normal for getting the cite and release passed in El Paso. That's a really big deal. So good job, Colt and El Paso Normal on that.
Yes, you can find the link to the video. We pulled the whole video of the entire hearing and we put it on our YouTube, so you can find it there. But I just am going to real quick pivot to a few things. So I gave you an update about City Council, THC testing. So now I would actually like to talk about the hemp action that is going on. So let me get to this. So as you guys probably know, I'm going to share my screen for just a second so you can see this. Texas passed our hemp program in the last legislative session. There has been a lot of regulatory work going on. There are farmers that have now been licensed and are starting to plant seeds. Seeds are certified. There's that process that has come out. Texas Department of Agriculture takes care of all of that. Then there are the hemp CBD products for human consumables, right? And that is under the purview of the Department of State Health Services, DSHS. And they released their newest iteration of the rules. You can find a link to read it here. But the biggest thing that we note is that it is going to prohibit, not just as the statute lays out, the growth and manufacturing, but now also the distribution and the retail of smokable products. So a lot of people were concerned about, what does a smokable mean? Like, does that mean loose flower? Does that mean vape cartridges? Does that mean pre-rolls? And so we've heard some guidance back, and they have decided that loose flower does not count, and that it's more the cartridges, the pre-rolled, I'm wondering if it's even going to be like the hemp cigarettes that you find packaged at the gas station, all of those types of things, and that it's going to be going a lot off of like the labeling. So being really thoughtful in your labeling. So if you are a business owner and you have an issue with that, we strongly encourage you to give some feedback. They also address some laboratory regulations and some other information there. And so if this is something that you're interested in, I definitely suggest that you get your comments in before the June 8th deadline. A couple things I want to highlight real quick. So we talked about the prohibition, but it also will require licenses before engaging in the manufacture, processing, and distribution of these products. It's going to be $250 per facility for a license for 1 year. Retailers will also have to obtain a license, and that will be $150 per location for 1 year. It's going to require all hemp and hemp derivatives to be tested by an accredited lab. It's going to have to talk about the presence and concentration of cannabinoids, presence, quality of any residues, solvents, heavy metals, pesticides, you know, kind of what we typically see in a lot of the other states. So that's nice. It has some labeling requirements, which some people may have issue with some of those things, but we just wanted to bring that to your attention that it's the last opportunity for comment. You have a little less than a week. So you have until the 8th. I suggest you get it in before the deadline so you're not squeaking by. So that is coming up. And then I also wanted to talk about future events. So Texas is currently in the process of opening, where we're located in kind of the capital city area. It's like a tri-county area. Travis County, where the capital is extending their shelter in place until the middle of June. I'm not really sure exactly how all of that will impact the opening to a certain extent, but that definitely means that we will not be back at Flamingo Cantina probably for July. So we're going to be doing our July meeting virtually like this as well. And that is going to have some guest speakers, but we're also going to have a special election candidate forum. Excuse me, I wanted to make sure I said that just right. So we sent the invites out today to all of the candidates that are running in Senate District 14. It's a special election. July 14th is the election. If you're familiar, Senate District 14 was Kirk Watson's district. He is vacating his term, and this person will serve out the remainder of his term. There are 6 candidates, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, an independent, and a libertarian. And so we've invited all of them, and we hope that they will all be able to participate, but we'll see who all can join us. We'll also have a special election voter guide available for you guys in the next couple of weeks that will tell you, you know, how do they kind of set themselves apart on their policy. August could potentially be our first in-person meeting. That is to be determined. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to hang out, but we want to make sure that, again, like we've said, I feel like I say it a lot, but we have to be very conscious because in our community, we have a lot of people who fall into the high risk category with different illnesses, the elderly, etc. So we will keep you updated. We appreciate you guys staying involved. But we are still at this point in time going through with the Puff and Putt, which is on September 19th. It was in April and we were able to move it out to September. It's in a big wide open area. There's lots of space for everyone to spread out. And so we are planning on going forward with that in September, just to let you guys know. So I'm going to look real quick. I think I see that there are a couple of questions. Let's see. Is there a link available for the DSHS policy? Let me drop the link in response to that question. And it's going to be a link to where you can both find the action alert and the text of that. So let me type that in there. All right, so that is in the Q&A in Zoom. And now it is also in the comments on Facebook. All right, let's see, next question. I see. If the submission period to DSHS on hemp regulations ends on June 8, when will the regulation goes into effect? It is stated on the resolution. Let me pull it up real quick and I can answer that for you. believe it says it's buried a little deep. So maybe I can't answer that right off the bat, but it would go into effect pretty quickly. And if you click on the same link for the hemp action, you can read that for yourself and make sure that you see exactly when it would go into effect. I am not sure if they will go through another iteration. Okay, another question says, does that mean that flower we have sourced from Oregon cannot be in pre-roll form, or just that flower is sourced from Texas cannot be in pre-roll form? So my understanding is if the regulations were to go into effect as they are today, then that would mean that there could be no in-state manufacturing, distribution, or retail sale of any smokable hemp products. So in your brick and mortar store, you would not be able to have pre-rolls or vape cartridges, wherever that hemp flower might come from, wherever. However, one thing that they didn't really address was online merchandise and selling through the online market. So we don't know if a Texas-based business could then just sell that online and ship it to the person so that they're not selling it in the brick and mortar store. We don't know the answer to that question. And so something that you would like clarity on, I definitely would submit some comments talking about how you need some clarity on exactly where to draw the line on that. Let's see. On the license, is that for growing? So no, the licenses that I talked about that were 250 and 150 just now, that was for a manufacturing license, 250, and a retail license, 150. We do have access to all of the, let me see if I can go find it real quick. All of the farmers regulations and pricing. I want to say it was like a certain price for your license, and then it was also a certain price per each lot that you had. Give me just a second. Do you have anything to add to that, Dave? I'm going to see if I can find this real quick. You might be muted if you're trying to talk. I'm looking at this.
I listen to you to know what's going on with hemp and CBD. I'm
Okay.
more of a marijuana guy myself.
I'll have to maybe see, maybe it was on Informed Texas. That's where I posted the detailed one. I have to double check for you to get that resource. Hemp seed certification link is also available. Here we go. Sorry, guys, I just want to see if I can answer it now. I want to. I'm having trouble finding it right offhand. But it was a certain amount for the license to actually grow, and then for each lot that you wanted to grow for that as well. And you're also responsible for certain testing prices and or costs and other things like that. Let's see, how much longer till Texas can legalize? So the next opportunity for us to pass legislation having to do with creating adult use market will be in the upcoming legislative session. And that's going to start in January. And once we get through that session, we'll have new rules or new laws, and hopefully we'll have passed a legalization law. Now, if you're talking about how long do we think till that's likely to happen, I don't know if it would happen in this next session. Honestly, all of the economic impact that has happened from the pandemic, I kind of feel like almost anything could happen. If you would have asked me before this, though, I would have said it probably wouldn't have been this session, but the next one. However, we have talked to quite a few legislators, 4 or 5 different legislators who are super interested in drafting something and crafting something that has to do with legalizing cannabis. I'm going to do is we have a activist training page. It has all kinds of helpful links and information to tell you about the election and legislative cycle that we have to go through. So what I'm going to do is, in response to your legalize question, Purple, I'm going to respond to it there. All right, I see a few more questions here as I'm typing this out. Drop your questions real quick and then I'll try to get to them. We'll do a few more rounds of that. So I also dropped it in the Facebook. All right, so we still have a few more. Thank you, thank you. Is pre-rolling classified as manufacturing? They are choosing to do that, yeah. So that is how they are defining it. So that's why loose flower is, you don't know what the person is going to be doing with that loose flower. They could create a salve, they could use it to season their tomato sauce. You know, they could use it in quite a few different ways. The pre-rolling is more like with the, it's rolled up for someone to light and smoke. That is what it is rolled up for. And so yes, that would classify as manufacturing a smokable item. That's my understanding. Have they defined what a lot is? Yes, they have defined what a lot is, and you kind of determine the size of the lot. There's been different advice that I've heard given based on, you kind of don't want to have to pay a whole bunch of lot fees, but also you have to test each lot. And if one lot is hot and the other one's not, then you don't have to destroy everything. So that's kind of a balance, and they have that defined there. And there's a little bit of leniency for how many you as the, or how large you as the grower want your lots to be. And there's, I guess, different mindsets as to what is a smart way to do it. One big lot or lots of tiny lots. So that's that. Replacing crude oil with cannabis sounds like a thing. I totally believe that hemp has the potential to change a lot of things. Right now, what's really hot is the human consumable hemp products. Talking about, you know, everybody's into like CBD and CBG and CBN and all this stuff. But I think what the long-term really cool thing is going to be all of the innovation that we're going to start seeing in like hempcrete and hemp fabrics and all of that. They're out there, but they're not super, super readily available. And so I think that that is something that we're going to see a lot more of. And I've seen, you know, hemp plastic is a big thing. Some people say that talking about legalization because we've seen so much litter and trash come from the packaging that is required, trying to maybe make it out of a hemp plastic so that at least it would be biodegradable. Is it okay to sell online if there's no regulation pertaining to it? I would tell you, you need to ask your lawyer, your legal counsel, to define that for you, and that they should probably reach out to DSHS on your behalf for clarification. It's not specifically addressed at this time. That doesn't mean that perhaps they won't address it in the future. So I definitely would not feel comfortable giving you an answer for you to like base your whole business on. You need to get legal counsel and be helped with that answer. So if loose flower is allowed, does that mean other smoking products like papers can be sold along with the flower? I didn't see anything would lead me to believe that you couldn't, but I'm not entirely clear with that. And so, for example, if you're someone who's manufacturing a baked goods, it doesn't go into all of the kitchen regulation that you have to be subject to. It just refers to that. So if you are a manufacturer and you're already creating food, and you already have your licenses in place, you're just going to have to apply for this license to add, you know, hemp products now to your baked goods or whatever. So I don't know how that would affect a retailer type situation. So if I would get legal counsel for that too. Another silly one. Our pre-rolls are rolled for us by the farm in Oregon, and then we sell it here. So they're not being manufactured in Texas. Right, I get that, but you're selling them in Texas, right? And so the statute says no manufacture or production, but the regulations have so far as to also include distribution and retail. So if these regulations passed as they are written, then you would not be able to sell in a brick and mortar store pre-rolls, cartridges, things intended or marketed for smoking. So I would say still the answer is you probably should not. And they're saying, you'll probably recall when the law first was signed in, they grandfathered in a lot of products that were on the shelf. They're also giving you a period of time from once you get your, once the retail licenses are available, you have to apply for it within a certain amount of time. And then you have to make sure all of the stuff on your shelf is compliant to that, for that. So I would also take a look at that. There's this, firm called Coates and Rose, and they hold like a weekly cannabis call, and they're lawyers and they talk about this in depth. I find it very interesting. So if you want to do that, I would look them up and sign up for their email list and get on those. Let me just check and see if there's any questions on the Facebook feed real quick. Daniel, how much does it cost to join the amazing organization that is saving Texas, that's saving lives, Texas Normal? P.S. I already know the answer because I'm a member. Thank you, Daniel. So we have a variety of membership packages if you are interested in becoming a member of our organization. Just the basic membership is $20, but we do also have memberships at the supporting level, which come with a shirt, at the Freedom Fighter level, which comes with a shirt and a really cool stash jar. And we also have lifetime memberships as well. So if you're interested in participating in that, I will also take a link to our memberships and drop that as well. And just so you know, we also do these limited edition orders of merchandise, and our most recent one was a really cool stash jar, and we are going to be doing another one soon. We're kind of deciding on what it is right now, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. I don't have the jar right in front of me to show you guys, but it turned out looking hella cool. It was from 420 Science. They have been longtime supporters. So I think that I have answered all of the questions that I see in the Q&A and in the Facebook comments. So I just want to say thank you, Dave, for hanging in here with me and chatting with everybody. And thanks to everybody that called. If you guys have any questions, you can reach out to us at info, @texasnormal.org. Texas is spelled out without the A. So let us know if you have any questions. Also, if you need to get a hold of Justin, you can get a hold of him at policy@normal.org, also spelled without the A. So on that note, did you have any last minute things that you wanted to add, Dave?
Well, I hope that one result of these protests is that our law enforcement officers and our police associations and police unions will realize there are positive things they can do in Texas to improve their relationship with the community. And one of those things is our issue, reforming marijuana law. And so I hope that when we talk to law enforcement officers and when we talk to our legislators, that we will tell them that we want better relationships with our police officers. We should not have to fear our police officers. And marijuana law reform is a path forward, in my opinion. So that's the last thing I want to say today.
I agree. I mean, it will not fix all of the problems, but I definitely think it is a big component whenever we start talking about all of the issues that become intertwined with the prohibition of marijuana and even further the war on drugs. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and for always supporting us and tuning in. This will be up on our YouTube later, and I will also post a blog with links to all of the things that we chatted about tonight. So I just want to say thank you to each and every one of y'all. Even though we're not together, we're really together, and I look forward to seeing you guys in person and when we can hug you guys. it's going to be legit. So on that note, I'm going to say farewell and take care.